"I'd trade 100 horses for just one night with you," whispered the wild cowboy to the widow. The sun was slowly sinking behind the hills, painting the plains in shades of gold and orange. Anna stood on the porch of her small wooden house, her eyes tracing the horizon where the wind carried dust across the wide-open land. It had been nearly 3 years since her husband had passed, leaving her alone to manage the ranch that had been in their family for generations. Every day felt the same, filled with hard work, quiet moments, and the occasional sound of a horse's hoof echoing through the fields. She was strong, careful, and independent, but there were times when the silence felt heavy, pressing against her heart. The ranch was not large, but it was enough. A few horses grazed in the pasture, and a small herd of cattle moved lazily near the creek. Anna's life revolved around the land and the animals. She knew each horse by name, remembered their quirks, and understood their moods. She spent mornings repairing fences, checking the water troughs, and feeding the animals. Afternoons were reserved for chores that required patience, like mending blankets or tending the garden. Evenings were hers to enjoy a simple meal and watch the sky change colors as night approached. It was a quiet life, predictable and safe, but it carried a loneliness that no amount of work could fill. One afternoon, as Anna guided a stubborn mare back into the stable, a cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. At first she thought it was another traveler passing through the plains, but the figure grew larger and more distinct. A man rode steadily, his posture confident and relaxed. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face and a jacket that had seen many seasons. His horse moved with a smooth, practiced rhythm, and the rider seemed to command attention without even trying. There was something about him, an energy that felt alive, dangerous, yet strangely comforting. He reached the edge of her property and slowed, tipping his hat slightly as he observed her work. Anna paused, brushing the sweat from her forehead, and studied him in return. He was handsome in a rugged way, with sharp features softened by the sun and wind. There was a calm in his eyes, but behind it, she could sense a life that had seen adventure, struggle, and freedom. He was no ordinary traveler. He carried a presence that made the open land feel smaller, as if his very being filled the plains around him. "Afternoon," he called in a low, steady voice that carried over the breeze. Anna straightened, gripping the reins of the mare a little tighter. "Afternoon," she replied cautiously, unsure of what brought him here. She had learned to be wary of strangers. The small town nearby had its share of travelers, and not all were kind or trustworthy. "I'm Caleb," he said, dismounting smoothly and tying his horse to a post near the house. "I've been riding through these parts for a while. Thought I'd see the land for myself." Anna studied him, sensing honesty in his tone, but also curiosity.
"I'm Anna. This is my ranch," she said simply, nodding toward the stable and fields beyond.
Caleb's eyes followed the motion of her hand, taking in the neat rows of crops, the sturdy fences, and the horses grazing calmly. "It's a fine place." "You've done well here." She offered a small smile, not used to receiving compliments. Most people only noticed the work that needed to be done, or the land that was empty and harsh. "Thank you." "It's all I have to keep me busy," she admitted, her voice soft. Caleb nodded, understanding more in that one gesture than words could convey. He leaned against the post, watching her work with an easy patience. Anna went back to her chores, moving with practiced precision, but she could feel his gaze on her. It wasn't intrusive. It was curious, admiring even, yet respectful. It made her uneasy in a way she hadn't felt in years. She was not used to being seen, not really seen, by anyone who didn't have a need or an agenda. For the next few minutes they worked in silence, the only sounds being the gentle rustling of leaves, the occasional whinny of a horse, and the soft thud of hooves on the earth. Caleb occasionally helped by holding a gate open or adjusting a rope, but he never overstepped. There was a carefulness in his movements, a sense that he understood boundaries without needing them spelled out. Anna couldn't help but notice how smoothly he handled the animals, how easily he moved among them, as if he belonged here in some way. As the sun dipped lower, Caleb finally spoke. "You managed this place alone?" Anna nodded, her gaze fixed on a fence post she was repairing. Ever since my husband passed. I do what I can. The land keeps me busy, and the animals, they need care. It's not easy, but it's life. Caleb's expression softened. He seemed to understand more than her words. You're strong, I can see that. And patient, too. That's rare. Anna felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Pride, yes, but also curiosity. There was something in his tone that made her wonder about the life he had led, the roads he had traveled, the stories he could tell. She wanted to know him, yet fear held her back. She had learned over the years that people often came and went, leaving more emptiness behind. Why are you here? She asked finally, turning to face him. Just passing through or looking for something? Caleb shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. Maybe both. Sometimes you ride for the land, sometimes for yourself. I'm not sure what brought me here, but I'm glad it did. His gaze met hers directly, steady and unflinching. I don't often find a place like this, a place that feels real. Anna felt her heart beat a little faster. She wasn't sure why, but his words resonated with her. For years, she had felt trapped by the past, bound by routines and memories. Yet here was someone who seemed to understand the value of what she had built, of the life she had carved out on her own. The evening wore on, and the sky darkened to a deep indigo. Caleb helped her finish securing the horses for the night, making sure each one had enough water and hay. There was a quiet rhythm to their work, a harmony that felt natural, as if they had known each other longer than they had. When the chores were done, they walked toward the porch, the last rays of sunlight casting long shadows across the land. Thank you for your help, Anna said, her voice soft but sincere. You're welcome, Caleb replied. It's been a pleasure. You've built something remarkable here. Most people wouldn't have the courage to keep going alone. Anna smiled faintly, a warmth rising in her chest. It was the first time in years she had felt seen, not just as a widow or a rancher, but as a person. She wanted to ask him to stay, to linger a little longer, but she didn't. Some part of her feared what it might mean, feared that hope could hurt her if it left too soon. Caleb mounted his horse, preparing to leave, but he paused and looked back at her. I'll see you again, he said simply, tipping his hat. There was a promise in his tone, quiet but unshakable, as if he meant to keep his word. Anna watched him ride off into the fading light, a strange mix of anticipation and fear stirring within her. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long while, she felt that the world might hold something unexpected, something worth waiting for. As night fell and the stars emerged over the wide plains, Anna sat on her porch, listening to the soft sounds of the ranch settling for the night. The wind whispered through the grass, the horses shuffled in their stalls, and the world seemed larger, more alive than it had in years. She thought of Caleb, the stranger who had appeared like a spark in her quiet life, and wondered what stories he carried, what dreams he chased, and how long it might be before he returned. Somewhere in the distance a coyote howled, and Anna felt a shiver of anticipation. Change was coming, she realized. She didn't know what form it would take, but she could feel it in the air, in the way the plains stretched endlessly before her, in the way her heart stirred at the memory of a cowboy who seemed as wild and untamed as the land itself. The next morning, Anna woke to the soft light of dawn spilling across the ranch. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying the scent of earth and horses. Her body ached from the day's chores, but there was an unusual lightness in her chest. She couldn't explain it, but her thoughts kept drifting to the cowboy who had arrived the day before. Caleb's presence lingered in her mind, as though the wide plains themselves had whispered his name into the morning air. After feeding the horses and checking the fences, Anna was surprised to hear the familiar sound of hooves approaching. She looked up and saw Caleb riding slowly toward the ranch, dust rising behind him like a thin golden cloud. He tipped his hat in greeting, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Morning," he called. His voice was calm, warm, and easy to listen to, like it had been shaped by long days under the open sky. Anna nodded, feeling a flush of something she hadn't felt in years. "Good morning," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. She wasn't sure why his presence affected her so strongly, but there was a sense of safety in it, and a strange excitement too. Caleb dismounted without fuss, tying his horse to the post near the stable. "I thought I'd lend a hand," he said, glancing at the horses grazing nearby. "It looked like you had a lot to do yesterday." Anna hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "If you don't mind, there's always more to do than I can handle alone." She handed him a bucket, and together they walked toward the stables. Caleb moved with a natural confidence, his hands sure and gentle as he tended to the animals. Anna noticed how he spoke softly to each horse, as if he understood them in a way that came from experience, not training. As they worked, the silence between them was comfortable, not awkward. Caleb's presence had a calming effect, and Anna found herself relaxing in ways she hadn't allowed for a long time. He asked about the ranch, the animals, and her life, but never pried into her past. It was clear he respected her boundaries. She answered honestly, telling him about the challenges of managing everything alone, the long hours, and the small victories that kept her going. "You're very capable," Caleb said after a while, pausing to tie a loose rope. "I can see why the ranch runs so smoothly. Most people wouldn't be able to handle it on their own." Anna shrugged, feeling a mix of pride and modesty. "I don't have a choice. It's either this or the land falls apart. I suppose I've gotten used to it." She glanced at him, noticing how his eyes followed her every movement, steady and observant. There was no judgment there, only a quiet admiration that made her heart beat a little faster. As the day wore on, Caleb proved to be more than just helpful with chores. He knew how to mend fences properly, guide the horses through training exercises, and even suggest improvements to the water system. Anna found herself learning from him. Yet she also noticed how careful he was not to take over. He was there to assist, to share, not to dominate. That balance earned her respect and trust. By midday they had finished most of the chores. Sweat glistened on their foreheads, and the sun beat down relentlessly, but neither seemed ready to part ways. Caleb suggested they rest for a while under the shade of a large oak tree at the edge of the pasture. Anna hesitated, unused to such casual companionship, but she nodded, grateful for the moment of reprieve. They sat on the grass, drinking water and letting the horses graze nearby. Caleb leaned back on his hands, his hat tilted against the sun. "This land, it's beautiful," he said softly. "There's a kind of peace here that's rare these days." "I can see why you stayed even after everything." Anna's throat tightened, and she looked away, focusing on a horse that grazed near the fence. She wasn't ready to talk about her husband, not yet, but there was something in Caleb's voice that made her feel understood. She nodded quietly, offering only a faint smile. For the next hour they shared stories of their pasts, careful to keep them light and safe, but honest. Caleb spoke of the roads he had traveled, the towns he had seen, and the people he had met. His stories were filled with adventure, but also with small moments of kindness he had witnessed along the way. Anna listened intently, fascinated by his perspective on life, the freedom he seemed to carry in every word. In return, Anna told him about the ranch, about the struggles she had faced alone, and the small joys she found in the daily routine. She spoke of the satisfaction in seeing crops grow, the comfort of a horse nuzzling her hand, and the quiet pride in keeping her husband's legacy alive. Caleb listened without interruption, never offering advice unless she asked, never turning her experiences into lessons for himself. There was a respect there, a patience, that made Anna feel safe in sharing her world. By late afternoon, the sun had moved west, casting long shadows across the plains. Caleb offered to help round up the horses for the night. Anna accepted, and together they walked the pasture, calling out to each animal. The horses responded to Caleb's calm voice, coming closer without hesitation. Anna noticed how the animals seemed to trust him immediately, as if he had earned it through quiet strength rather than loud commands. As they worked, Caleb asked questions about each horse, its age, its habits, and its personality. Anna found herself laughing at some of his observations, enjoying the way he noticed details she had long taken for granted. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of companionship that went beyond mere conversation. There was a shared rhythm to their actions, a mutual understanding that made the work feel lighter and more enjoyable. When the last horse was safely in the stable, Caleb paused to wipe the sweat from his brow. "You've built something remarkable here," he said again, his voice sincere. "It's not just the land or the animals. It's the care, the attention, the life you've put into it. Most people wouldn't have the patience or the courage to do it alone."
Anna felt her heart warm at his words.
Compliments were rare, especially ones that recognized not just what she did, but why she did it. She looked at him, meeting his steady gaze, and felt a flicker of connection, something that went beyond friendship or curiosity. It was a quiet acknowledgement that perhaps, just perhaps, she wasn't as alone as she thought. Evening came, painting the sky with soft hues of pink and purple. Caleb offered to stay for dinner, and though Anna hesitated, she agreed. Sharing a simple meal of bread, cheese, and fresh fruit, they talked about their dreams and hopes, not in grandiose terms, but in small, meaningful ways. Caleb spoke of places he wished to see again, people he wanted to reconnect with, and moments he wished he had cherished more. Anna spoke of her dreams for the ranch, for stability, and for a life that balanced work and quiet joy. As night settled in, Caleb stood to leave, but he lingered at the doorway. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said simply, tipping his hat. There was a promise in his words, quiet but unmistakable. Anna nodded, feeling anticipation and a strange comfort in knowing he would return. Alone on the porch, Anna watched the stars emerge, twinkling over the vast plains. She thought about Caleb, about the ease with which he had entered her life, and about the subtle shift she felt in her heart. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to consider that someone could care for her not out of pity, but out of genuine admiration and understanding. The wind carried the scent of the earth and the horses, and Anna felt a sense of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. Change was coming, subtle but real. And as she closed her eyes, listening to the quiet sounds of the ranch, she knew that tomorrow would bring more than just chores and routine. It would bring the return of a man who had stirred something in her heart, something that might just grow into trust, friendship, and perhaps even something more. The night was calm, but in her chest a quiet excitement pulsed. The plains stretched endlessly before her, but for the first time they didn't feel lonely. Somewhere in the distance, a horse neighed, and Anna smiled softly. Life had begun to shift, and she was ready, in her cautious way, to see where it might lead. The days that followed Caleb's arrival passed in a rhythm that was both comforting and unsettling for Anna. The morning light revealed her routine in clear focus, feeding the horses, checking the fences, tending to the garden. But now there was an added anticipation that made each task feel lighter, yet heavier, at the same time. She couldn't help but wonder if Caleb would appear again, bringing with him the calm, steady presence that had unexpectedly entered her quiet life. As the sun rose higher, Anna noticed small changes in her feelings. She found herself looking toward the horizon whenever she worked, expecting to see the dust cloud of a horse approaching. She caught herself smiling when she thought about his easy laugh, the way he spoke to the animals, and the quiet respect he gave her. It was a strange sensation, unfamiliar yet welcome, a mixture of curiosity, admiration, and something deeper that she could not yet name. Caleb returned that afternoon just as she had hoped, though she refused to admit it aloud. He dismounted with the same smooth confidence, tying his horse near the stable. "Afternoon," he said, tipping his hat with a slight grin. His eyes held the same calm warmth as the first day, but there was a softness now, an understanding that had begun to develop between them. Anna nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Afternoon. I was starting to think you might not come back." Caleb chuckled softly. "I wouldn't miss it. I've enjoyed seeing how you manage everything here. You have a way of making even the hardest work seem natural." Anna felt a blush rise to her cheeks, though she looked away quickly, returning her attention to the fence she had been mending. There was a moment of silence, comfortable but charged, as if both were aware of the unspoken thoughts hovering between them. They worked together through the afternoon, guiding the horses, mending fences, and checking the water troughs. Caleb's presence made the work easier, his strength and experience balancing her careful, practiced methods. They moved in a quiet harmony, each understanding the other's rhythm, yet there was an undercurrent of tension, small glances, lingering touches when passing tools, and moments when words seemed unnecessary. Despite the growing closeness, the outside world began to intrude. Word of Caleb's visits had spread through the small town. By mid-afternoon, a neighbor stopped by, lingering too long near the edge of the property. "I hear you've got company these days," the woman said with a hint of curiosity, her eyes narrowing slightly as they flicked toward Caleb. Anna's jaw tightened. She had expected some gossip, but it still stung. "He's helping me with the ranch. That's all," she said firmly, returning to her work. Caleb didn't comment, but Anna sensed a protective awareness in him. He worked quietly, steady, and unbothered by the prying eyes of neighbors. Yet she knew he had noticed, and in a subtle way it made her heart pound. Not from fear, but from the realization that she cared deeply about what others thought, even after all these years. As the afternoon wore on, clouds began to gather on the horizon. The wind picked up, rustling the tall grass and sending a chill through the air. Anna glanced at the sky, worry knitting her brow. Storms on the plains were sudden and often fierce, and there were still cattle grazing in the distant fields. "We should bring the horses in before it starts," Caleb suggested, his voice calm but firm. He had already mounted his horse, scanning the horizon with practiced eyes. Anna nodded, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. She knew Caleb could handle the work, but she also knew her responsibility lay with every animal on the ranch. "Let's start with the far pasture," she said, her voice steady despite the worry in her chest. They rode together, moving quickly but carefully through the open fields. Caleb guided the horses with ease, calling to them in low, soothing tones. Anna followed, her heart beating faster, not from the physical exertion, but from the awareness of being side by side with him. There was a tension in the air, not just from the approaching storm, but from the growing feelings that neither of them had yet named. As they worked to round up the last of the horses, a sudden gust of wind whipped across the plains, sending dust and loose branches flying. One of the horses panicked, bolting toward the edge of the fence. Anna reacted instinctively, reaching for the reins, but the animal was too quick. Caleb was immediately at her side, grabbing the horse's reins and guiding it back to safety with a strength that was calm and controlled. Anna's heart raced, and she realized how much she relied on him, even without acknowledging it aloud. She had spent years managing alone, but in that moment, she felt a quiet relief at having someone she could trust. Caleb's hand lingered on the reins a moment longer than necessary, their eyes meeting briefly. There was no need for words. The silent understanding passed between them, deeper than any conversation could reach. The storm arrived shortly after, dark clouds rolling across the sky, rain beginning to fall in heavy drops. They guided the last horses into the shelter, working side by side, soaked to the skin but undeterred. Lightning flashed in the distance, and the sound of thunder rolled across the plains, but there was a sense of exhilaration, a shared triumph in their efforts. Once the animals were safe, they sought shelter under a large oak tree, the rain pelting down around them. Caleb removed his hat, shaking water from it, and looked at Anna with a smile that was both reassuring and teasing. "You handled that well," he said, his voice carrying over the rain. "I think the horses have learned not to test you anymore." Anna laughed, a sound that felt strange and freeing after so long. "They test me every day," she said, shaking her hair out of her eyes. "But today I had help." Caleb's gaze softened, and for a moment the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them, the rain and the wide plains. "You don't always have to do it alone," he said quietly. "There's strength in asking for help, too." Anna looked away, feeling a flutter in her chest. She wanted to agree, to admit that his presence had already made a difference, but words caught in her throat. She had been alone for so long that the idea of relying on someone else, even in small ways, felt both thrilling and frightening. As the storm eased, they began the long walk back to the house, water dripping from their clothes and hair. The ranch was quiet. The animals settled for the night, and the sky was tinged with the last light of evening. Anna felt a strange sense of peace, despite the chaos of the storm. She was beginning to realize that Caleb's presence was not just a distraction but a balm for the loneliness she had carried for years. Over dinner, they spoke more freely, sharing small stories from their lives, moments that were personal but safe. Caleb spoke of the open road, the sunsets he had chased, and the people who had shaped his journey. Anna shared memories of her husband, the joys and challenges of the ranch, and the small victories that kept her motivated. They listened to each other, not judging, not advising, simply hearing and understanding. After the meal, Caleb helped with the last chores for the night, checking the animals one last time and securing the gates. Anna watched him, noticing the careful attention he paid to every detail. It was not just skill, it was care. A thought occurred to her. Someone could care for the land, the animals, and her life, without expecting anything in return. It was a foreign idea, yet it felt comforting, almost magical in its simplicity. Before leaving for the night, Caleb paused at the doorway, glancing back at her. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said, his tone carrying the same quiet promise as before. There was no pressure, no expectation, just a certainty that he would return. Anna nodded, her chest tight with emotion she could not name. She watched him ride off into the night, the stars beginning to shine above the plains. She felt a mixture of hope and fear, excitement and caution. Change was coming, subtle but undeniable, and she was beginning to understand that she might not have to face it alone. That night, as she lay in bed listening to the distant sounds of the ranch, Anna thought about Caleb's presence, the storm, and the way he had handled the horses. She realized that she was no longer just a widow managing her land. She was someone who could feel connection again, someone who could trust another person with small parts of her world. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of wet earth and grass. Anna closed her eyes, allowing herself to imagine the possibilities that tomorrow might bring. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, she felt a quiet hope. She was no longer alone, not entirely, and that small shift in her life made all the difference. The next few days passed with the same rhythm of work and quiet companionship. The mornings were filled with chores, feeding the animals, checking the fences, tending to the garden, but there was a new energy in the air. Anna felt it in the way Caleb moved beside her, in the way he laughed at her dry humor, and in the gentle encouragement he offered. His presence had become a part of the ranch, a steady and comforting force that she had not realized she had been missing for so long. One late afternoon, after the chores were done, Caleb suggested a ride. "The storm yesterday reminded me how quickly things can change," he said, his tone serious but calm. "I thought we could check the distant pastures together. It's better to see the land when it's quiet."
Anna nodded, feeling a thrill of anticipation she tried not to admit aloud.
She mounted her horse and followed him across the plains. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the fields. The wind was gentle, carrying the scent of dry grass and distant rain. For a while they rode in silence, the only sounds being the soft clop of hooves on the earth and the occasional call of a bird overhead. The open land stretched endlessly before them, and Anna felt a strange sense of freedom, as if the plains themselves were holding space for something new to enter her life. Caleb rode beside her, calm and steady, his presence both grounding and exhilarating. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt this alive, this connected to another person without worry or hesitation. As they approached the edge of a small hill overlooking the valley, Caleb slowed his horse. He dismounted, motioning for Anna to do the same. The wind whispered through the grass, and the sky was painted in deep oranges and purples as the sun began to set. The view was breathtaking, the kind of moment that made the world feel endless and full of possibility. Caleb turned to her, his expression serious but gentle. "Anna," he said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you." His voice carried a weight, a sincerity that made her heart beat faster. She looked at him, waiting, unsure what he would say but certain it mattered. "I've traveled a lot in my life," Caleb began. "Seen many places, met many people, and I've learned that some things are rare. Rare to find, rare to feel. Some people come into your life and change it without even trying. He paused, searching her face, and Anna felt a shiver of anticipation. You're one of those people, he continued. I've never met anyone like you. Strong, brave, kind, and yet full of warmth and heart. I admire you more than I can say. His voice softened, and he stepped a little closer. I would trade 100 of my prized horses for just one night with you, not in the way people think, but to show you how much you mean to me, to spend time with you, truly with you, without distraction or fear, just to be near you and let you know how much I care.
Anna felt her breath catch.
She had not expected such honesty, such raw emotion. His words were simple, but they carried depth and truth that went beyond the surface. She looked at him, searching his eyes, and saw nothing but sincerity, nothing but genuine care. For a long moment, neither spoke. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind rustled the grass, the sun dipped lower, and the valley stretched endlessly below them. Anna realized that she had been holding back for so long, afraid to allow herself to feel again. Yet in that moment she understood that Caleb's words were not just admiration. They were an invitation to trust, to connect, to open her heart once more. Finally she spoke, her voice soft but steady. Caleb, I've been alone for a long time. I've learned to manage, to survive, to keep moving forward. I wasn't sure if I wanted to let anyone in again. She paused, taking a deep breath. But I feel something with you, something I haven't felt in years. And I think I want to see where it leads. Caleb's face broke into a gentle smile, relief and joy shining in his eyes. He reached out, taking her hand in his, their fingers intertwining naturally. That's all I could ever hope for, he said quietly. I don't want to rush anything. I just want you to know how I feel and be here with you. If you'll let me. Anna squeezed his hand, feeling a warmth that spread through her chest. She realized that trust wasn't about giving up control. It was about allowing someone to share the weight of life with her, to walk beside her rather than taking the lead. In that quiet moment, she felt the years of loneliness and fear begin to lift, replaced by a cautious but exhilarating hope. They stood together on the hill, watching the last light fade from the sky, the stars beginning to appear one by one. The plains below were bathed in a soft, silver glow from the rising moon. The world felt immense, full of possibilities, and yet intimate, as if this small corner of it had been waiting just for them. For the first time in a long while, Anna allowed herself to simply be, to feel, to breathe, to exist in a moment of connection without expectation. Caleb stood beside her, not speaking, but offering presence, support, and the unspoken promise that he would remain there. Steady in stride, after a while they mounted their horses again, riding slowly back toward the ranch. The night was cool, the wind carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and earth. Anna felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years, a quiet certainty that this was a turning point in her life. She wasn't rushing, and neither was Caleb. There was no pressure, only the steady unfolding of trust and care. When they reached the ranch, Caleb helped secure the animals and check the fences one last time. Anna moved through the routine with a sense of calm, noticing how the work felt lighter when shared. She realized that life had always been demanding, but it need not be lonely. There was strength in connection, in shared effort, and in the quiet understanding of another person. As Caleb prepared to leave for the night, he turned to her once more. "Good night, Anna," he said softly. "I'll see you in the morning." Anna smiled, a genuine warmth in her expression.
Good night, Caleb. Thank you.
For everything. He tipped his hat, mounting his horse, and rode off into the dark, the sound of hooves fading across the plains. Anna stood on the porch, watching him disappear into the night, her heart full of a strange but welcome anticipation. The stars shone brightly overhead, and the ranch seemed to hum with quiet energy. Anna felt a connection to the land, the animals, and the man who had entered her life with such gentle care. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future that was not just about survival, but about companionship, trust, and even love. Sitting in the stillness of the night, she thought about Caleb's words, the sincerity in his eyes, and the courage it had taken for him to speak them. She realized that sometimes the greatest risk was simply opening one's heart, and that sometimes the reward was worth every moment of uncertainty. Anna closed her eyes, letting the peace and warmth of the evening settle over her. She had faced storms, both in life and on the plains, but she had also discovered the strength to face them with someone beside her. Caleb had not just offered help, he had offered understanding, respect, and the possibility of a shared future. And for the first time in many years, Anna felt the quiet thrill of hope. She knew that the road ahead would have its challenges, but for the first time, she also knew she wouldn't have to face them alone. The plains stretched endlessly before her, and the night carried the promise of new beginnings, trust, and the gentle unfolding of a connection that could grow stronger with each passing day. The morning sun spilled over the horizon, painting the plains with soft hues of gold and amber. Anna stood on the porch, stretching her arms and taking a deep breath of the crisp air. The world felt alive in a way it hadn't in years. The ranch, her home, and the wide open land seemed to welcome her with a quiet warmth. She could still feel the echo of Caleb's words from the previous evening, and with a small smile she realized that the fear and hesitation she had carried for so long were beginning to fade. By the time she had finished feeding the horses and checking the fences, she heard the familiar sound of hooves approaching. True to his word, Caleb arrived just as she had hoped. He rode with ease, his presence calm yet vibrant, and there was a small smile on his face as he approached. "Good morning," he called, tipping his hat. "Good morning," Anna replied, a soft warmth in her voice. She noticed the way the sunlight caught his features, the way his eyes held the same steady understanding she had come to trust. There was no rush, no expectation, just a simple presence that made her heart lighter. Together they moved through the morning chores, tending to the animals, checking the water troughs, and repairing a section of fence that had weakened over the week. The rhythm of work was familiar, but it felt different now. Shared, easier, and even joyful. Anna noticed the small things, how Caleb moved with confidence but carefulness, how he laughed at the smallest jokes, how he seemed to notice what she did without interrupting or overshadowing her. During a brief pause, they sat on the edge of the barn, catching their breath. Caleb handed her a water bottle and smiled. "You managed this place so well, Anna. It's impressive. But I think it's even more remarkable how you keep yourself going, day after day."
Anna took a sip, feeling a warmth in her chest at his words.
"It's not always easy," she admitted, "but it's my life. The land, the animals, they give me purpose. And, well, it's easier when there's someone willing to help." Caleb's smile deepened, and for a moment, silence fell between them. Comfortable, filled with understanding. Anna realized that she no longer felt the weight of loneliness pressing on her. Instead, there was a quiet anticipation, a hope that had been missing for years. She allowed herself to enjoy it, to acknowledge that Caleb's presence had become more than assistance. It had become companionship, trust, and even the faint stirrings of something deeper. By afternoon, the tasks were nearly complete. Caleb suggested a walk along the ridge, where they could watch the plains stretch for miles under the afternoon sun. Anna agreed, eager for the quiet moments they shared without the constant rhythm of chores. They walked side by side, their steps falling into a natural pattern, speaking only when necessary. The open land made conversation easy, a gentle exchange of thoughts and reflections rather than heavy words. They paused at the top of the ridge, overlooking the valley below. The cattle moved slowly across the fields, and the horses grazed peacefully. The sun cast a golden light that shimmered over the plains, painting the world in warmth. Caleb turned to her, his eyes calm and steady. "It's beautiful here," he said softly. "And you've made it feel alive, full of care and love. That's rare in this world." Anna felt a warmth she couldn't name. She realized that for the first time in years. She was not just surviving. She was living, and sharing that life with someone she could trust. She glanced at Caleb and saw not just admiration but a deep respect, a connection that had grown quietly and naturally. As they began their descent back to the ranch, Caleb suggested they check on the distant pastures, where a few stray cattle had wandered during the storm the previous week. Anna agreed, and together they guided the animals back, their teamwork seamless. There was an unspoken rhythm between them now, a trust that made the work easier and even enjoyable. They laughed when a stubborn calf refused to move, and they shared quiet words of encouragement when one of the older horses faltered. By the time they returned, the sun had dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the ranch. Anna felt a sense of accomplishment, but also a gentle joy she had not known in a long time. Life had been heavy and lonely, but now it felt shared, lighter, and full of possibility. Caleb chopped vegetables while Anna tended to the fire, and they spoke of small dreams, plans for the garden, ideas for improving the barn, thoughts about future rides across the plains. There was no pressure, no rush, only shared moments, laughter, and quiet reflection. After dinner, Caleb stepped outside to check on the animals one last time. Anna followed, feeling a sense of contentment she had not felt in years. The sky was filled with stars, the air cool and fresh. They stood side by side, watching the plains stretch endlessly before them. "Anna," Caleb said finally, breaking the comfortable silence, "I want you to know something. You've changed my life, too. I've traveled far and seen much, but I've never met someone like you. Strong, caring, and brave, yet so full of warmth. I'm grateful for every moment I get to spend here with you."
Anna turned to him, her heart full.
"I feel the same way," she admitted softly. "I never thought I would find someone I could trust again, someone I could share these days with. But I do, and it feels right." Caleb's eyes softened, and he reached out, taking her hand gently. "I don't want to rush anything," he said, "but I want you to know that I'm here for you. Not just for today or tomorrow, but for as long as you'll have me."
Anna felt a tear slip down her cheek, a tear of relief, gratitude, and joy.
She realized that she had been carrying the weight of the past for too long, and now, with Caleb beside her, she could finally allow herself to hope. Hope for companionship, for trust, and for a future that was not just about survival, but about shared life and care. The days that followed were filled with quiet joy. Anna and Caleb worked together, sharing the tasks of the ranch, tending to the animals, and caring for the land. Their bond grew naturally, strengthened by mutual respect and understanding. The townspeople began to notice, and gradually, whispers of gossip turned into quiet admiration. Anna realized that she no longer feared judgment. The connection she had found with Caleb was more important than the opinions of others. One afternoon, after securing the last of the horses, Caleb suggested a ride across the plains. Anna agreed, and they set out together, the wind in their hair, and the open sky stretching endlessly above. They rode slowly, speaking in quiet tones, sharing stories, and enjoying the simple pleasure of each other's company. As the sun began to set, they stopped at a small hill overlooking the valley. The world was painted in oranges, pinks, and purples, the colors reflecting in their eyes. Caleb turned to Anna, his hand brushing hers gently. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring," he said softly, "but I do know that I want to face it with you. The work, the challenges, and the quiet moments in between. I want to be here, beside you." Anna smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. "I want that too," she said, her voice steady. "I've been alone for so long, but with you, it feels right. It feels like life again." They sat together watching the stars emerge, and for the first time in years, Anna felt fully present. She realized that love and trust were not just about grand gestures, they were about shared moments, quiet understanding, and the willingness to face life together. Caleb's presence had brought not only companionship, but also a renewed sense of hope, courage, and joy. As night fell and they rode back to the ranch, Anna felt a sense of completeness she had never known before. The animals were safe, the land was cared for, and her heart was lighter. She knew that challenges would come, as they always had, but now she had someone to share them with. Caleb had become more than a helper or a visitor. He was a partner, a friend, and perhaps something even deeper. Standing on the porch that night, watching Caleb ride off into the distance, Anna felt gratitude and hope fill her chest. She realized that the plains, the ranch, and even the storms had prepared her for this moment, the moment when she could open her heart again and embrace the possibilities of life shared with another. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings, trust, and companionship. Anna smiled softly, knowing that whatever came next, she would face it with Caleb by her side. The ranch stretched endlessly before them, a place of work, life, and now, quiet happiness. And for the first time in years, Anna allowed herself to believe that life could be not only survived, but lived, and that love, trust, and connection could bloom even in the quietest, most unexpected places.